attention for a moment? Put that coffee down. Let's talk about something important. Because we're adding a little something to this month's sales contest. As you all know, first prize is a Cadillac Eldorado. Anybody want to see second prize? Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired. Somebody should stand up and strike back. Somebody should do something to them. The hell exists on this earth? Yes.
What can you do?
I gotta tell you, I'm ready to do the Dutch.
I know what I'll do. I'll go out and rob everybody blind and go to Argentina.
You think you're a thief?
We're just talking.
We are?
Yeah, we're just speaking about it.
Speaking about it is an idea. We're not actually talking about it.
No.
It's a robbery.
There's a robbery? No.
And what is it we're so afraid of?
All you need, a little boost.
Tonight is the thing.
So be it. What happened?
What happened?
We had a slight burglary.
Criminals come and they steal the phones.
They stole the phones. They stole the... Oh.
You robbed the office.
Oh, sure, I robbed the office. Oh, sure.
You did that?
Will you get out of here?
How can you talk to me that way?
Are you talking to me?
I talk to the police. I get nervous.
You know who doesn't?
Who?
Thieves.
What's your name?
Al Pacino, Jack Lemmon, Alec Baldwin, Ed Harris, Alan Arkin, from the Pulitzer Prize winner, Glengarry Glen Ross.
This is how we keep score, booby.
All right. Well, Logos Theater 3000. And Bill, where are you currently?
I'm in Tempe, Arizona, at ASU.
And yeah, and the high temperature today was
105 degrees. It's toasty.
Yeah, it's pretty toasty. You gotta love the desert, especially in mid-May. Well, it's getting warm here in Colorado as well. Like the sun effect is just pretty intense because of the elevation that we're at. But we are doing an early 90s movie. We're going to keep our string of rated R movies going with one that started off in. Hey, did you hear of the play before?
You mentioned the play. I haven't seen it. I hadn't seen this movie before either. Heard of it, but yeah.
So it started in 1984. Was a playwright by David Mamet, who's written a lot of things you probably are familiar with. Untouchables, wrote the screenplay for that movie. Great movie. A few other like political dramas. Wag the Dog, which is it's a great movie. And so he's become kind of a prominent screenwriter, but he started off, and this became like, I think he won the Pulitzer Prize for this screenplay. But I'll say this, the screenplay is good, but the movie is much better. And the reason is, and we'll get to the reason why, the movie is I think significantly better than the play. And then I've never seen the play on stage, which would like to do that if I ever get a chance. So amazing. Have you ever seen a movie with like that well of a cast before?
I was shocked when the credits or whatever at the beginning of the movie, and it was like star-studded. So many big names.
Don't you love the beginning credits? Like I hadn't seen a movie that had like the long intro credits.
Yeah,
that has like because they don't do that anymore,
with
right?
the train running by and
the
all the
train and the jazz.
Yeah, it was a long opening.
Yeah,
scene. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I fast forwarded through some of that. I was ready for the movie to start, but man, it was like name after name after name, like all superstars.
And then when the movie starts, it starts like it kind of starts on a mountaintop and then kind of keeps you there. And I'll just kind of go down the list of the cast for this movie. So directed by James Foley. I'm not really sure what else he's directed. You can look it up. But Al Pacino as Richard Roma, Jack Lemmon as Shelley Levin, Alec Baldwin as Blake, which that character is not in the play, and Alan Arkin as George Aronow, I guess how you pronounce his last name. And then Ed Harris as Dave Moss, and then Kevin Spacey as John Williamson. who I guess Kevin Spacey has not aged well. I mean, he's
He's a villain in the movie and a villain in life.
That's right. Talk about it. Which, when that all came out, that wasn't all that surprising, to be frank.
Well, you're not. You're Matt.
So I've seen this movie quite a few times. The acting is so good. It's just one of those movies that it's like kind of the premium when it comes to just actors, right? It's really what, 2 scenes.
Yeah, there's I guess in the office, in the bar, and in the house there.
Yeah, and that's added in again from the movie and the play. That kind of scene at the house.
The fact that guy's wife might be the only female in the entire movie that I can think of. I mean, it's all dudes.
It's all dudes. It's like the coat lady at the Chinese restaurant.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. It's interesting when you watch a movie. I think this came out like 92. When there's a payphone, right? They're using the payphone.
When that came up, I asked my wife, like, "Do you remember what those smelled like?" All those phones had the same smell, that industrial plastic, just grubby and people's grime all over them. They all had the same smell.
Oh yeah, the movie really does. It just feels like a 90s movie, like payphones. Hey, call me at the restaurant because I have cell phones, right? And they can't work because the phones in the office obviously were stolen. So it definitely has like that. And did you catch I caught this, and I didn't catch it the first few times I watched the movie. The Chinese restaurant, like some of the lights were off on the sign, so it gave you this feel like this was in like kind of a. With the train nearby, like this is not the nicest part of town.
It's kind of gritty.
It's pretty great. Which I guess kind of represents, New York in the early 90s, late 80s, right? It's kind of just, you're likely to get mugged kind of time for New York City. Again, amazing cast. Let me ask you, as you had no idea what this movie was about when you first started watching it. No. At what point? Well, I'll just ask you this.
Well, I'll tell you, I had heard of the movie only because I watched another movie that it's called Zack and Miri Make a Porno. Have you seen it? It's a comedy.
Wait. I hope you have seen it.
It's got Seth Rogen in it.
Seth Rogen, that's right.
Yeah. Well, there's a part where they're talking about a movie with a bunch of guys, and you're like, Glengarry Glen Ross? And I was like, okay, so this movie has a lot of men in it. That's all I knew about the movie.
Yes. And, I will just get to it because the opening scene is not in the play. And the reason why they added that scene was they needed something kind of strong to open the movie, something kind of like a strong scene that would explain the kind of where these guys are mentally. And so, which I think the scene does really help.
Yeah, it sets the
what
tone.
What were your thoughts when you watched that first 4 or 5 minute scene with Alec Baldwin?
Yeah, pretty foul language. It doesn't stop there. But I will tell you I had 2 favorite quotes from this movie. I'll go ahead and jump into that.
Sure.
It's where he's talking about the prizes. First prize is Cadillac Eldorado. Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired.
You're fired.
I mean, it's a lot of those. I mean, clearly those salesmen are under a ton of pressure.
It's unbelievably and I think that's why that scene is needed. Frankly, because it doesn't. When you read the play, you get the desperation, especially the scene where Shelley, who's played by Jack Lemmon, and Kevin Spacey's character John are basically having that conversation in the car. You get that scene in the play where you realize that Shelley's in a pretty desperate situation. However, what I caught about the movie was the picture of his daughter on his desk. That was a driving force.
Yeah,
he was doing.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, she's Was she in the hospital? He's on the phone a bunch
Yeah,
talking. Yeah.
correct. And so there's a desperation, but in the play, all that's mentioned about like Mitch and Murray are downtown. They're just kind of generally presented
Yeah.
as these kind
Yeah.
of forces outside of the office
Yeah.
that kind of control their fate. But to actually put a face and a voice to it, really, I thought really helped to basically state how desperate these guys are.
Well, that whole Mitch and Murray thing, I mean, it's just kind of this nameless, faceless evil. It's almost kind of like Sauron in Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's this, it's heavy, it's stark, it's menacing, and you don't really see, except for the representatives. Blake comes in as a representative, and he's very intimidating, and they just live under the shadow of the downtown headquarters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his, like you stated, like third place, you lose your job, right?
Yeah.
It's and even when in that scene he says, "By the way, you're all fired."
Mm-hmm.
That you get your jobs back by tonight, right? Based off your performance. The things that he says. So Blake's character, played by Alec Baldwin, really has this back and forth argument with Ed Harris's character, Dave Moss. Very antagonistic. What are some things that you remember? Because when I watched the clip a few weeks ago. That's why I wanted to watch this movie, and then watch the whole movie. It really caught me. I was able to really catch some of the things that Blake uses to basically describe himself compared to them, like some things that he possesses.
You're talking about where he's talking about his $80,000 BMW, and his watch costs more than Moss's car.
Right.
All these earthly things that have value.
Right. He says, "My watch costs more than your entire salary."
Yeah.
And basically, and he says, he like sits down, takes his watch off, puts it on the desk, and says, it really kind of like struck me, because he says, like, "Do you want to be a good man or a good husband? Like, who cares? Do you want to be like a good dad? Then go home and play with your kids and like get a new job." And like, he basically places, like, if you want to be successful, if you want to be a true man, you've got to like basically throw those things away and trash them and only focus on this job, which, by the way, is a fairly crummy job. They're selling like crappy real estate. And like what they're selling is impossible to sell, and who they selling them to. Like, they talk about the leads.
Mm-hmm.
The funny scene was like they're kind of like racist, kind of saying like, "Did you get a Patel, like an Indian?" They don't buy anything; they just talk your ear off, right? And they're getting these just crazy leads that nobody has the money to pay for these properties, and they're expected to sell them to these people. And by basically lying, because they do a lot of lying in the movie, right? He's like, he tells this fake secretary.
Oh yeah.
By the way,
lie after lie. It's very manipulative.
Oh yeah, it's manipulative. It's a lie after lie after lie. Even Roma, who's the more successful of the four, constantly lying to the guy that
he's terrible.
The restaurant, and then when the guy comes and says he needs his money back, he keeps lying and lying and lying. So they're meant to sell crap with bad leads and then to lie the whole time. And it's like the moral character of these characters are so low. But I think there's a sense, and I get kind of the thing I want to talk about is the sense of desperation that's what they have to be to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And
they know what they're doing is wrong, but they justify it by, I got to put food on my family's table.
Right, exactly. Or I got to help my daughter who's in the hospital, and I've got to pay for her hospital bills, or these type of things. And it made me think like that desperation, and men who are in these situations where they're having to prove their manhood on one side, and then on the other side, they have to just perform for the sake of like getting by.
Yeah.
And they have to sacrifice any type of virtue to be able to accomplish this. And it made me think, is that, while maybe we've come a long way since the early 90s and kind of the salesman life, but like how far away have we come from that?
Well, I think that the corruption and greed are still as rampant as ever. I'm not in the sales world, so I don't know how true to life the story is. It was convincing, but I think that people misplace their values constantly. I mean, that's human nature doesn't change. We're the same people today that they were in the 90s. I mean, clearly.
Yeah, so as we and I thought through this, because it's not just mentioned you're not in sales, but there are people in your company that are definitely in sales. You have competition with UPS and now Amazon, and as a company who you're trying to make profit, and you're trying to, but you're not. The good thing about FedEx is you don't have to necessarily like lie. It's not like you're selling something that's so foreign. Like, here's the Glengarry real estate in Florida. Look at all. It's like,
Yeah, I'm in my role. I'm just a cog in the machine, man. I do my job and go home.
You're not selling the Rio. I don't know what
No.
the Rio Rancho. I think it's some some land in Arizona. I think is where it was that they were trying to sell. Always be closing that idea, and I do think like within this kind of concept of like proving yourself and proving that you're worthy, it gets to like, I would say one of the bigger, we talk about lust with men in particular, but which is definitely an issue, but we rarely talk about the fear of man sin, and I definitely, you catch that. I mean, Blake was meant to be there to strike fear into them and to basically manipulate them to lie more, to as he says, I think his direct quote is like, there's money out there, go and take it. If you're not willing to take it, then I have no sympathy for you, is basically what he says.
Well, yeah, kind of from 2 episodes ago, it's kind of Nietzschean, isn't it?
It very much is.
Yeah,
it's survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah, and it's a means to an end, and it doesn't matter what you do or how you do it. It's the result that matters.
Right. And it goes back to even to Sicario, the means, the ends justify the means, right? And the end is sales, right? And that's the way that it works. So like, with that being said, like, how much of this concept of fear of man is an issue even today with American men?
Yeah, well, Americanism is an interesting concept in comparison to the biblical picture of what maleness should look like, right? Clearly these guys' identity is based in their performance as salesmen, and the Bible would say instead that our identity is in Christ, right? And that supersedes national boundaries. But I don't know. There's a definite conflict between the identity that these salesmen have, where they find their identity, and the identity that we should find as believers. And I think that conflict exists whether it's in this sales room or anywhere else. I mean, I'm reminded a little bit of is it Friday Night Lights?
Oh yeah,
where the one football player is Booby Miles or Booby Mills. Yeah,
Booby Miles.
He gets injured, right?
He does.
Loses his college scholarship, and he's destroyed because football is his identity.
That's right.
I think that's a consistent theme in daily life. And one place that Christian faith gives us an alternative. Who are we? Why are we that valuable? It's not our performance professionally or athletically. It's not the size of our bank accounts.
Yeah, because that's what, Blake's again states that like definitive statement that I am successful, you are weak. You're
Mhm.
weak because you stink at selling crap.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it states that as, and I think like that becomes a defining theme that, again, Shelley is willing to go along with Dave Moss with this stealing, breaking into the office, stealing the leads, selling them to a competitor, because again, that was what they were asked to do. Like they were asked to to basically to act and to cut corners, and they were kind of compelled to this
Yeah.
end. And you wonder sometimes about the male heart. Even it's like, what are you willing to do to get ahead? What are you willing to do to be seen as successful? Because you realize that if you are seen as successful, all the benefits that come after that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like the BMW, the watch, the respect, the honor from other people, like all these different things. They don't need to know. They don't know your heart. They don't even maybe know
Yeah.
how you got there. All that matters is what they see in front of them. And again, that end, you can justify a lot of means that got you there.
Yeah. And two, each of the salesmen kind of displays a different kind of weakness.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and you can evaluate a little bit if some of these men are more, virtuous in their pursuit than others. I mean, they all are failing. You think about who's Jack Lemon's character again? Lima?
Shelley. Yeah.
Shelley?
Shelley Levine. They call them the
Shelley
machine.
Levine. Yeah, the machine. Well, he's desperate to succeed so that he can, ostensibly like pay his daughter's medical bills,
Right.
right?
Right.
You've got Air now, who is kind of weak-willed and is,
Passive. Super passive.
yeah, and he's easily influenced by some of the other characters. Moss is angry and bitter and just wants to get back. Um, you know, uh, Kevin Spacey's character, he's not a salesman, but he's just kind of like a robot. He doesn't, the only independent thinking he does is to sell Shelley a couple of leads, in secret. That's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you kind of have a little bit of sympathy for Shelley, or I did anyways, during the movie, until you find out that he actually did break in and tear the place up to steal the rest of the leads. So I mean, he was really just as corrupt as the others, and not to mention, Al Pacino's character. I mean, he's probably the worst liar of them all.
Yeah. He's very slimy.
Very slick.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. And very arrogant. Obviously, he
yeah,
realizes, he has no care that the office was robbed. All he cares about is his car. He's
yeah,
very like single-minded.
yeah.
It does
There's
seem
really
like,
there's really no truly virtuous characters in the film. I mean, even the guy who gets taken advantage of by Roma at the end is just reduced to this, pathetic little puddle of a man. He's kind of, he's a victim of his wife. He's a victim of Roma. He loses his money and he just kind of slinks out of the sales office defeated.
yep. Did you recognize who that actor was? Jonathan Pierce.
What's up? What else is he in?
So he plays Keira Knightley's father in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh gosh, he does.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's Jonathan Pierce.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's I mean, he's looked very young in that movie,
Yeah.
for sure. So obviously, I think it does in a lot of ways depict, I think, a pretty like we talked about earlier, like with New York itself, like a pretty gritty America,
Yeah.
which I think is probably more accurate than we like to admit. And again, the fear of man complex that puts a lot of men in the situation of just appeasing like their bosses and not really thinking about like the consequences of what they're doing. And I don't think this is like necessarily as Christians supposedly like an anti like capitalistic business idea, which I think you could go off on that by saying like, look at this corruption in the capitalistic system and look how greedy these men are, and they're sort of like kind of like casting blame or shame on people who sell things.
I don't know that you can equivocate, just American greed and corruption. And I'm just saying Americanism because it's setting in America, but like the failings of these guys does not speak to like the capitalist system. I think that this is just one very interesting story that demonstrates the fallenness of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I think there's different ways you can kind of like maybe learn some lessons from like a story like this. Number one, there are ways of doing business that are biblical and just.
Absolutely.
Number one, you don't lie, to customers. Number two, sure, and even like the idea of like, I think this is true. Like they say this often, like products should sell themselves. You shouldn't have to lie to sell products, things like that, And so you state, the quality of the product, you're fair in exposing them to the different details of the product. You answer questions in regards to the product, and you obviously try to sell it at a fair price that that you're able to sell it based off costs that you have as a business and these different things. And so, I think biblically, there's plenty of proverbs that say like we don't, when it comes to the weight system, you don't like cheat customer, right? By like saying, oh, it weighs more than it really does. By cheating. I think these are clear like ways that you don't do business and transactions as a Christian.
Well, I think what does the Bible say about usury, right? As far as isn't that where it's lending at a profit to your brother,
right?
And two, there's a lesson in here for Christians on both sides of this conflict, the seller and the buyer. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the way about which these salesmen practice their business is kind of antithetical to the scriptural the virtues described in the Bible. But even the buyer, we're supposed to be wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. The being a Christian, I think C.S. Lewis said, being a Christian doesn't give you license to be stupid.
Right.
Yeah, so you have a responsibility as a believer also to be wise in your decision making. And so the character who's taken advantage of by Roma is not doing his responsibility to his family either.
Right. And so this story, there is very little redemption. There is no heroes. I would say it's a story of, obviously sinners and bad characters. There's also victims as well. And I would even say some of the salesmen are a part of that victim class where, they're kind of in a system that kind of compels them. They're responsible for their actions, yes, but there's a system that is promoting and stressing and pushing these actions. So like, if you were to say, and this is a good conversation because I think it leads to a lot of avenues of where's the false gospel in this story, would you say?
Well, okay, so number one, I don't see a Jesus figure in the story. But Christian adjacent would be concepts of love. There's no love.
No, there's none. Now, I will say this, just to stop. there is a section where it does seem that Roma does respect Shelley when they kind of talk about his sale. And like,
Yeah, it does.
but I think he messes it up because remember at towards the end of the movie, he tries to like basically say, "Why don't you come underneath me, and I'll get like X amount percentage of your sales." Like it seems like Roma started to find an angle,
Yeah, I don't
advantage
know
of him a
how much
bit.
he actually respects Roma so much as he respects the things that Roma did a while back.
Yeah,
And again, it's all based on greed and how can Roma help or how can Shelley help Roma? Because
right,
Roma looks out, the moral of this movie seems to be you got to look out for number one because nobody else
exactly,
is,
right.
right? Um, there's and Roma's so slick too because he kind of pulls Aaron now aside and he sweet talks him a little bit, and then he sweet talks Shelley a little bit, and it's all in self-interest. Um, when you talk about false gospel, I mean the movie doesn't really, in my mind, condemn looking out for yourself.
No,
Um,
that is like the virtuous life, right?
Yeah, and that's while you do have a responsibility to care, provide, protect for your family as a man, talking about the biblical man, uh, you've got to provide for them, you've got to protect them, you've got to minister to them, right? I mean, these men were the spiritual leaders of our family, and all these characters were lacking in moral fortitude, uh, either by choice or by accident. Um, I mean, so
Yeah,
that, yeah, there is a flawed message in there, but also the story seems kind of like a Greek tragedy
oh yeah,
because there's no
absolutely.
happy ending.
No,
Uh, and then life, what do they say? Like life sucks and then you die.
that's right.
That's kind of it's very very pessimistic, outlook.
Yeah, so it does present kind of even though they don't talk about God or the afterlife or any of these type of concepts, you
Yeah,
definitely it's like this is all that there is, right? I mean, so hence the Blake character. Like, if you want to live a full life, then do the things that I do, and you can buy
yeah.
the
So
things
you
I
can buy
bought.
the nice things.
You can buy
Yeah,
the United States, and then you can be the guy that they send down here to
yeah.
like basically yell at a bunch of losers.
Yeah. They're saying that, the joy in life doesn't come from being a good father, spending time with your kids, taking care of your family, which we would say that's one of the most significant sources of joy. For them, it is you want the nice car, you want the nice watch, you want the respect of your peers, and there's only one way to get that, and that is to abandon the things that are secondary and focus on the most important thing, which is right here in this office.
Yeah, I what kind of caught me, especially guys like the Shelley character, because he's an old man, right?
Mm.
He's kind of
Yep.
like,
At the end of
and
his
in some
career.
ways they kind of like, even though they don't say it, it's kind of like they're baseball players, right? He's like, oh, you're on a hot streak, I'm on a cold streak, kind of what you would use for
Yeah.
like baseball
Yeah.
players. He's an old man who's past his prime and he can't sell anymore. It's pretty much
Yeah.
the gist with him. And you could tell like he's a man who he's what does he have to show for all of this stuff? I mean, he even keeps going back to like, well, a few years ago I was the one on top, like I was the top salesman, every month, like, but not anymore. Like, what have you done for us lately? Kind of mentality, and you're like, what have you gained for all of this giving up? I mean, like even like this Blake character, like Shelley used to be this guy who sold well, but what does he have to show for it? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, the seems the common denominator for all these guys is that they struggle with pride. Um, Bible speaks to that.
Yep.
And not just the Bible. I mean, um, hubris is as a downfall is represented across all times and cultures. Um, it's something that's comfortable and it's something that feels good, but it's temporary. And um, that's, placing your worth on your accomplishments is not something that lasts.
It brings up the passage like Matthew 16:26, which I think Jesus mentions in all three of the synoptic gospels, is for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul, right? And I mean, that passage is true. You think about
Shelley agrees.
Yeah, right. Like these guys don't believe that. Like that's kind of not the goal or the chief end in regards to them. They believe that it is about gaining the whole world, right?
Matt, what is the chief end of man? I'm curious.
Well, I just wrote that, as like an encouragement to parents. Like that's kind of the goal of parenting is teaching our kids to glorify God and love Him forever, right? That's the chief end, and that's not a part of this world in Glengarry Glen Ross. That office does not live by that viewpoint, and so and I'll just kind of tell you kind of where I went with this in my heart is how much of this we're gonna go there. How much of this is more like the church world than we like to admit?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, because I do think like you take this context and you put it in like some grimy New York office, you can almost distance yourself from it and go, oh yeah, well that was then, and you're cussing and they're saying all these words, and you put it in the church context and you put it there. Are there similarities? And I do think there are. It's just a lot cleaner. It's kind of whitewashed tombs, right? It's kind of like it's cleaned up really well, but I wonder why I think more pastors should probably watch movies like Glengarry Glen Ross, because I think it brings up really where the heart is, and I think it is like a mirror that maybe we don't want to look at.
Yeah, my response to that is that human nature is human nature, right. And it'll reveal itself in whatever setting you're in a dingy real estate sales office with unethical salesmen
with the Chinese restaurant lights off, man.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And I've kind of got this theory that while some people's problems are not as desperate on the surface as other people's problems, the problems that you deal with in life are still problems to you,
right?
And so when you get to that point where you're like an animal that's backed into an injured animal backed into a corner, the human response is still the human response.
Right.
So when you ask about like, what does this look like if you put this in a church setting? The temptations and the addictions and the personal relationships might not be exactly the same as what they're dealing with, but our responses as people definitely can be. So yeah, that's a really interesting question.
Because really, which I know, you understand these historical things, but revivalism, Charles Finney, Second Great Awakening, is salesmen. Like some of them were like basically used car salesmen that got really good at
selling snake oil.
Oh yeah. And what do? I mean, it's a little. What do they say? Half truth are still lies, right? It's saying half truth, and it's the Joel Osteen's, like that whole world is basically used car salesman tactics. Just put in the church context.
Man.
And what do people do? They go, Joel Osteen is like the American pastor. Why? Because he's written all these books.
He tickles people's ears.
Oh, yeah. He's the Blake character, right? Not with he's not dropping the F-bomb. And
no.
But their persona is still that successful. And the guy with the 20-person church preaching the gospel but not telling lies, that's a loser. He's not willing to do what he needs to get. That's kind of the mindset. I'm like, that's Glengarry Glen Ross right there.
That's really neat that you said that. I am not a pastor, so I've never had to contend with the either pride or shame that some pastors might feel if their congregation is not the right size as their peers. I can see now that could be a serious source of contention. But that leads me to wonder how you feel about a church that kind of waters down, sugarcoats the biblical truths in order to keep butts in seats. Um, I read a book that Ravi Zacharias wrote the foreword on, and even though he fell out of popularity for certain reasons, the truthful things that he wrote are still truthful. Um, but I think I remember his argument being that, kind of like you said, a half truth is not a truth. And, it's while we do need to be winsome for God, we also don't hold the responsibility for, you know, you know, convincing every person that the truth is the truth. And so, even Jesus didn't, win every person he encountered, right? I don't know. I'd be curious what you'd have to say about that subject.
I've been reading Mark just to kind of look at like what did Jesus do, like just regularly do, and he taught,
Yeah.
he did heal people that were brought to him. It's not like he walked down the street looking to heal people; they were brought to him. He interacted with the Pharisees. But there was never a time where he was trying to sell himself. I mean, even to a point where he would tell people he would heal, like, don't tell anyone, right? I mean, he was doing the opposite of selling, And I think that it's almost like it's so American to get the sale, like always be closing. And I think you can even go into the Arminian world of closing the deal. You got to get them to close the deal. But, it's so interesting is that you could close the deal per se, quote, 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 but if their hearts aren't changed, then what's the point?
Well, what deal was closed?
And what deal was closed? And we're talking about salvation, which is only God's work. So all we're required to do is to speak the truth, and then God, through the speaking of the word, will change people's hearts.
And,
by His will, right?
We're not changing anybody's hearts ourselves either.
No.
And that's I think that gets kind of lost in the mix, because I did have a conversation with someone a while back, I can't remember who, where I was asking, why the evangelistic world feels so Arminian, because there is a problem logically for me in that if the Arminian goes out into the world to, make disciples of every nation and they're not successful, all of a sudden it seems to me that in the Arminian worldview, it becomes their fault.
Right.
And, they've been, and where is God in the salvation of these people if the Arminian wasn't convincing enough to sell the product? And I think that's not a consistent picture with, believers in Scripture.
Yeah, and it seems like, again, like I think it's almost like the Scripture is like a bad lead, right? It's not sufficient enough, and so therefore it has to be like added to and modified and all these other matters for it to sink in. And I still think it's like we're thinking it's trash that has to be sold. But it's the gospel, and it's God's good news through Jesus Christ to redeem sinners, and that is an amazing lead. That's like an amazing piece of property to own, and we're trying to feel like it needs to be, lied about, and we need to cut its pieces off to be able to sell it, and I think that gets into the American mindset, and I think that's why it kind of maybe hits home more, is that, are we needing to like cut the corners? Do we need to like manipulate and lie to get people to be closed? And when the problem goes back to what we were talking about, like, but if their hearts aren't changed by the Spirit, then there is no sale.
Does the concept of regeneration preceding faith would strictly apply to a person who subscribes to like a reformed theology, I guess.
Right.
And then in that case, salvation rests with God,
Right.
and not the salesman who sells it.
You could say getting them into the water,
Yeah.
like baptism, means nothing if their heart's not changed, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, getting them to say the prayer, do the baptism, that type of like strong arm salesman work, like, it doesn't lead anywhere. Like, you're not like, what are you hoping to receive if it's just quantitative numbers on a chalkboard that says I have this many sales this month?
Yeah.
And I get the Cadillac, right?
That's not to diminish the responsibility that we have as people, though, that, trusting in Christ is still a decision.
That's right.
But it would be a decision that falls under the umbrella of God's sovereign plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this is not, and I think, someone could argue, are you like promoting laziness? Like, no, I don't, that's not the point here. And like we were saying earlier, you can be a good salesman that sells a product fairly. And that's a good endeavor. If it's a good product that will help someone or something that will benefit them, well, that's a good thing. But like, we're talking about like lying and manipulating and telling half truths. That is a totally matter altogether. That's not being like shrewd. That's being a liar.
It is.
And that's not a part of God's work. Like, God represents truth. As his servants, we do not take the devil's tactics to do God's work. Like, that's absurd.
The means do not justify the ends.
They don't. And we mentioned this with Sicario. Like, how you do something matters more than what you do, right?
Oftentimes, that's true.
That goes back to this as well. And I think that I really caught that in the movie when they kept on going. They go, I've just got off a flight. I'm only here for a day. That kind of thing. And they're in this office building in New York.
High pressure sales tactic.
Yeah. And they're like, my secretary just told me he had no secretary. There's no one.
It feels a little bit like some of these evangelists who go out and say the end is near.
The end is near, right?
You've only got a few minutes to repent.
Right. That's right.
And so then you talk about the reason you do a thing is more important than the thing that you do. Like, well, why are you Are you repenting? Are you saying you repent to avoid eternal punishment? Or do you recognize that God is love? Like do you recognize truth for truth? Yeah. I did have a conversation with another guy a couple days ago as well. Then they said that they considered it a no loss venture to believe, because if they're right, they're in heaven,
right.
And if they're wrong, they didn't lose anything,
right?
And I think like where is that person's heart?
Right.
Again, we aren't the judge of a person's heart. Like
right.
we're seeking to speak the truth, right? And let God do his work, as he intends. But just keeping Christianity as an insurance policy for your soul doesn't seem very heartfelt.
Right. And I think it presents this world that, yes, the world is broken and fallen, but especially as Christians, we're meant to do things different than the world. Like, so in business practices, we're meant to be different. When it comes to like persuasion, we're meant to be different. We're not meant to hide truth to get a sale or cut corners to convince someone and to pull it over someone. Like, that's not what Christ has called us to do. And I think the American church, especially those in pastoral ministry, have to check their hearts of comparison. It goes back to the fear of man concept. Like, who are they working for? Who are they serving? They're serving the Lord, not not some entity above them, like some denomination or some kind of peer-oriented like comparison idea that, this is my baptism I got this year, and this kind of mentality of as if like we're going to get something extra in heaven because we did this, That's just like that concept is so like bizarre and ridiculous that I think we get caught into that like sludge, I think, far more often than we probably want to admit. So.
Matt, you just convinced me that there's a Christian way to step on the scale every morning, and it frustrates me a little bit. You mentioned that it's you can't cut corners or hide and fudge a thing here or there. Because sometimes when I step on the scale in the morning, the number was a little bit higher than it was the day before, so I just don't put that number on the chart, and I wait till the next day when it can be a little bit lower. And that would be the not Christian way to track my weight in the mornings. So thank you for that.
That's between you and I guess your wife. I'm not sure.
I feel terrible about myself now. I need to go repent.
Just take an average for the month, right?
Yeah. Let's worry about that another day.
So let me ask you, like, with the amount of F words in this movie, would you recommend this movie to anyone to watch? Like,
okay, so
you watch this with your wife?
I did watch it with my wife,
okay.
And she fell asleep. But that's most movies, so it's not a judgment on the quality of the movie. But I did have a conversation with her about this topic because, like I said a week or two ago, watching these films, while they aren't, either Christian in message or Christian in theme, has value for believers because it allows us to weigh our worldview against something that is contrary to it, so we can evaluate, what we believe and why we believe it.
Right.
So I tell my kids all the time, I'm not raising children. I'm raising two men and a woman, right? I'm training them to be adults in the world, not to be children forever.
Right.
And so I want my kids to have the maturity to be able to see a thing like this and recognize what's right, what's wrong, how does this compare to what they're taught about the world. And if you there's a phrase, if you don't stand for anything you'll fall, or stand for something you'll fall for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a reason for being, then all of a sudden the $80,000 BMW and the watch more expensive than someone's salary sounds pretty nice. It sounds fun.
Yeah.
But if you have a reason for being, and for you and I, it's to follow Jesus the best that we can, out of love for God, because he's changed my heart. I can identify these kind of things, and it helps to shape how I interact with the world, not in a hateful, judgmental way, but like in a where do I separate the truth from the manipulation?
Yeah, and I think it is, very persuasive that there's a lot of, especially young men, that see the Blake character as that is the goal, right? Drive a $80,000 BMW.
Well, it's the American goal for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think it goes into, again, the reason why this movie I think is so helpful is that and for a lot of even parents, while they may not admit it, they want their kid to be Blake. They really do. And they may not want him to speak that way.
Yeah.
But they really want him to be they want him to be Blake. They want their
because they want their kids to be successful because it means that they were a good parent.
Exactly. And I think for all of his crudeness, if you were to cut that stuff off, like those are like that's the measurement, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I think while competition is great, I mean, competition is good. It presses upon us to work harder and do better and to practice. And
Paul uses competition analogies all over.
He does. So he's not calling out like that competition is bad or wrong.
It's healthy.
It is healthy, but again, where's your identity? Where's your heart? And again, in a lot of
Why? Yeah. What's the reason you're doing these things?
if we believe in the sovereignty of God, then you can't argue with God's sovereignty if you don't win, even though you did the best you could. I mean, like, you're not in control of all of the variables, nor are you control all the results. So that is hard, I know, to kind of get there from an actual like maturity level. But that, I think, is the level of like proper biblical maturity, is that you can kind of do those things well grounded. And
You're talking about, discerning, and I want my kids to be discerning, for sure.
And I think, maybe unless you have something else, I think when it comes to like, when we talk about our sons, but even our daughters, when you talk about other young men, you want them, and I think, I've talked this with other people, you want to get to a point where you're well grounded, that you're not constantly trying to change yourself so that you're accepted by a group of people or by your peers, and you're constantly trying to impress, and you're trying to fix certain things about yourself so that you're more impressive in certain areas. But you're just so kind of like, I am who I am. Like, this is I'm willing to work on some things that I'm weak in, but at a certain age, you are what you are, right? And there's a sense of like, your talent has gotten to where it is.
Yeah.
You know what you know, you do what you do, and you got to be okay with that. And if you're not, you're going to really struggle trying to prove and to be a man, right? And once you get the approval of others, then you're finally arrived as a man. And I was like, that is awful philosophy, and not really maturity whatsoever, where you're just like, I have Christ. I love the Lord. I'm willing to, when some people criticize me, I'm willing to embrace it and see some of the value of it, and not necessarily take it as like personal attack. And you just kind of grow naturally, and you're not constantly trying to, again, like, you're just like, you're not under the mastery of the fear of man. So
well, last thing for me, everything you said is true. Life can be easier with some of those things.
Sure.
But those aren't the most important things, and it's difficult to see sometimes. We lose the forest for the trees, because do we exist for the ease of living today, or of what comes later?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've told my wife before that in my mind, one of the essences of a Christian lifestyle is the virtue of delayed gratification, right? We suffer
into the system.
Yeah, we suffer today for what can be gains tomorrow, and I think there's something in there about that.
So I feel like we have to do a fun movie at some point. I think these harsh, dark themed movies are probably we have to come up with something that either we do like Top Gun Maverick for your sake and just have fun with that. It's about the man in the seat, not necessarily about the machine or whatever. I don't know. Do something that's that's a little bit more fun.
Something a little bit lighter.
Like maybe like the Eternity movie, something similar to that. Even though it was about
how about The Conjuring?
There you go. There you go. I was even thinking about I watched 12 Angry Men recently. That was a bit of a tough subject. So, but yeah, I wonder if we should make something that's not so dark.
Yeah. Well, I do want to do Troy at some point.
Yes, we could. That's not a very dark movie.
No,
it's a beefcake movie.
Well, takes one to know one.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. But maybe we can find like another comedy. Stay tuned to find out.
Yes. Yes. There's plenty of probably decently good comedy or lighthearted movies that we can still talk a lot about. Because I think, again, regardless, like we've talked about this a lot. I mean, and you were kind of mentioning it earlier, you kind of start watching a movie and not really realizing where it takes you. And I think that goes by the point of this is that Christians are going to the movies and are, yes, you enjoy a movie, you enjoy the intellectualness of a movie and these type of things. But again, it's also like there's a screenwriter and a director and actors, and they come from a broken world. They tell stories about a broken world, right? And so it already by definition, we're already in the kind of the gospel realm here. And some stories present a redeemer that really hits to the gospels. Others have no hope and no redeemer that you can speak to as well about how that's not true. And so I think we can go a lot of different ways.
I want to find a movie that has a strong hero and overcomes odds and shows hope when there's no obvious hope. And it can't be Lord of the Rings, because that episode would take 18 hours to do.
That's okay.
Yeah, we'll find something.
All right. Well, thanks, man, for jumping on. Thanks for listening. Those who are watching this or listening to it or watching some of the shorts that we put together. And again, like it's here at Logos, we like to talk about movies, and we're Christians that go to the movies, and we like to watch them and analyze them and learn more about why we are so thankful for what Christ has done for us, that He has redeemed us from dark, gritty worlds that we see like in Glengarry Glen Ross. But